You're listening to We Thought About Games, the podcast where games are looked at historically, fondly, and critically. I'm your host, Sid Menon, and for tonight's episode, we'll be discussing Ace Combat 5, the Unsung War, also known as Ace Combat 5 Squadron Leader, an arcade flight game developed by Project Aces and published by Namco for the PlayStation 2, and later published by Bandai Namco for the PlayStation 4. Joining me on this episode are IndestructibleCat
Hello.
and Bohampscious.
Hello.
Alright, so, iCat, how did you get into Ace Combat 5?
Well, I've been following this series since Ace Combat 3, the Western release of Ace Combat 3, and I've just been playing every game since then, with the exception of the 360 exclusive.
Alright, how about you, Bo?
Well, back when I was, younger, my stepdad bought Ace Combat 5 because he saw a cool game with planes. And I ended up playing Ace Combat 5 first. Then I went back and eventually later played the other games, including the Japanese version of Electrosphere. And I'm just a diehard fan of Ace Combat, with the exception of Assault Horizon.
Yeah, and for me, I saw the game previewed in PlayStation Magazine, I think. And I was like, oh, I think planes are cool. I grew up in Chicago and they had the Air and Water show there. So like, yeah, I think jets are cool. I'll get this. And I guess I kind of expected it to just be like a military action game. And then when it had a very dramatic story, I got really pulled in because if you listen to the previous episode, I'm also a big fan of Gundam. And this story is like Gundam, but without people having psychic superpowers to let them fire guns on strings.
It is very much, wow, cool planes.
The only superpower anyone in Ace Combat has is the ability to unload like 100 missiles onto their plane.
Yeah. I was also just kind of surprised by the fact that the game was so earnest in tone. In some ways, it could be seen as naive, but I don't know, especially in an era, like a decade that came to be defined by games trying to be so hard and gritty. Like Ace Combat 5 really did stand out, being hopeful. Also, anti-war in 2004 wasn't super popular.
Yeah, I still believe it's one of the few anti-war AAA series left. Now that Metal Gear is not in the hands of good old Hideo Kojima.
It has a especially precarious place in being an anti-war game with equipment licensed from Lockheed Martin.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing I wanted to get into before we started the episode in earnest, is that, yeah, this game licenses real-life aircraft, even though it's in a fictional setting, for the sake of accuracy and, thinking that planes are cool. And that is kind of uncomfortable.
You really need to, forget about it. Not that the game makes it easy, considering it's, one of the first things that pops up when you start the game.
The general sort of feel of Ace Combat is, war is bad, but planes are good.
But whatever cut that Lockheed Martin got from Namco for the Ace Combat 5 license, compared to how much of my tax money they're getting to build planes that don't work. It's a structural problem that you can't solve by not buying Ace Combat. Not that it absolves you or anything, or saying you don't have to be conscientious of the fact that it is using real planes.
I feel like it's okay to, just like the series, but also condemn the use of real-world weaponry in it.
Yeah. Alright, and with that out of the way, let's get into the development history. Bo, take it away.
Not too long after Ace Combat 4 in 2002 at the Tokyo CG Festival, they announced Ace Combat 5 in 2002. Prior to this point, Project Aces didn't actually exist as an internal development team at Namco. Instead, it was just Namco. But in 2003, they decided to form Project Aces officially, and that's when you would see them listed on Ace Combat 5, 0, and onward as Project Aces. And while they did have the sort of, cockpit view and, more realistic view for Ace Combat 4 for the first time, they literally got in the plane and modeled it. So, you had cockpit views, top speeds, all sorts of general avionic performance. That was all being modeled after the real-life counterparts. After a relatively short dev period for the time, the game was released in October of 2004. And it received pretty good reviews, despite being, sort of unrealistic. So this was Kazutoki Kono, his first overall directing role in the series. He did art direction on Ace Combat 4. You would see a lot of his artistic choices in the cutscenes, and he did a lot of the visual work on Ace Combat 2. Ace Combat 1 and 2 are a lot less integral, I guess, to the overall series than, say 3 and 4.
The soundtrack in 2 is fucking great.
The soundtrack in 2 is amazing.
It's impossible to bring up these games without bringing up their soundtracks.
If you want to get like a really good feel for Ace Combat 2's soundtrack, go look up Dinopolis.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the track, I would say, for Ace Combat 2. So they were able to model the environments in Ace Combat 5 after satellite imagery of real-world environments. For example, the mission we'll talk about later on, Whitebird Part 1. That general area besides the space elevator was actually modeled around an area in rural Japan. So like Ace Combat 2, 3, and 4 all take place in what we call Strange Real. We'll get to that in a second. They've got sort of an interconnected plot. 3 takes place way after 4 and 5. But like up to this point, it had been more of a, an arc, sort of like a set dressing. But with Ace Combat 5, they really brought the story to the forefront. And all this came together to make Ace Combat 5 a US million seller. It's not something that the previous one had accomplished.
Yeah, I don't believe they even got a million seller after that.
Speaking of Ace Combat 0, the cinematics in Ace Combat 5, they were directed by the same person as Ace Combat 0. That's Kosuke Itome.
Yeah, cinematics directed by Kosuke Itome, later the overall game director for Ace Combat 0.
Soundtrack by Keiichi Kobayashi, and they do fantastic work.
Yeah, so the music director and also one of the contributors to the soundtrack was Keiichi Kobayashi. And then Tetsukazu Nakanishi was the sound director and also contributed to the soundtrack. And then there were 2 other people who mainly contributed, Junichi Nakatsuru and Hiroshi Okubo. I tried to listen to the soundtrack to find some common threads, and they do have some things that separate them, but for having 4 composers, the sound is very consistent. It's not always the same genre, but you could listen to any of it and say that sounds like Ace Combat. It also features 2 original vocal songs, The Journey Home, which was written by Katsuro Tajima and performed by the Warsaw Philharmonic Orchestra, along with The Unsung War. The Journey Home has 2 different vocal versions with lyrics in English, and The Unsung War has a Latin chorus. This was all pretty heavy stuff for Namco at the time. It took them 3 years total to compose and develop the soundtrack, making it the most expensive Namco soundtrack of the time. It is a fantastic soundtrack. It is also the first one to feature a licensed song, Blurry by Puddle of Mud. Yep, the boys who wrote She Fucking Hates Me have a track on this.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was weird in 2004. It's really weird now. This is a band that has a section on Wikipedia called Lip Syncing and Other Controversies, followed by Connection with Fred Durst.
I really need to know the connection to Fred Durst now.
Apparently he signed on their label and helped them. And then the lead singer said, no, he never helped us. And then got in trouble. And then years later said, he actually helped us a lot. The lead singer seems like a huge dirtbag.
You gotta be like a special kind of asshole if I didn't be seen as unfavorable by comparison to Fred Durst.
And just the last couple of credits for this. The screenplay was by Sunao Katabuchi, whose only other writing credits are the FMV sequences in Shining Force Neo, and then later did the story for Ace Combat 7. Those are the only writing credits, which is kind of surprising, considering the quality of the story. Hey folks, Post-Edit Sid here. I should note that these are Sunao Katabuchi's only game writing credits. In between Ace Combat 5 and Ace Combat 7, he worked as the writer and director on the anime series Black Lagoon. And the translation was handled by Kevin Gifford and D. Scott Miller, and edited by John Ricciardi. His name might be familiar because the year after Ace Combat 5 came out, he founded 8-4, the studio responsible for translations such as the one for Nier and Dragon's Dogma.
I believe they also translated Undertale to Japanese, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Alright, so we mentioned the game being in a fictional setting called Strange Real. Kazutoki Kono was asked about this, and he said, "We coined the term Strange Real World when we were making the world of 4 using improper English grammar, but coined it we did. From that point on, for whatever reason, it became established to users around the world as Strange Real. For that reason, true Strange Real is what we call the world based on 4, from which the number titles have stemmed. The advantage of this setting is that it allows them to tell a story in a relatable real world without the baggage of real world politics, which can often be an uncomfortable sticking point.
And this is why they would do this Assault Horizon, you know.
Where it became an uncomfortable sticking point.
Oops.
The biggest changes in terms of the layout of the world is that in the space that would be the Pacific Ocean, there's the Eugean continent. The planet is still within the games referred to as Earth. I don't know if this is maybe a translation or story writing slip up, but there'll be references to real countries in it. So I'll say I want to go get Italian food later, or a plane's description will say it's a Russian design. It's like, what's Italy? What's Russia?
In a world where Spain is known as Sapen. I think they could have easily just made it in Italy, I don't know.
Yeah, there are some things that are very close and some things that are a little more different. They actually designed Strange Real for Ace Combat 4, but it was only a little different. And then in Ace Combat 5, if you look at the world map, it's actually been really overhauled and is now its own entity. And the big event in the backstory of the world of Strange Real that shaped it was a giant meteor called Ulysses 1994 XF04. It's using an actual naming convention. And it collided with the planet in 1999, and it killed 500,000 people, it displaced 1 million people, destroyed multiple urban areas, and caused a massive refugee crisis. And while none of that's specifically referenced within the game, it is important to why countries do certain things. It's the kind of detail where if you see it afterwards, you say, okay, that makes sense. It's, the kind of thing that they sometimes fail to do with games set in the real world about why they do things they do.
Funny you should bring that up, because I think Ace Combat Infinity, the free-to-play one, has the real world, but the Ulysses still, crashed into the planet. So it's the same thing, but with real-world countries, and it's strange. Strange real, even.
You see a lot of the stuff that countries use to deal with Ulysses in their own way. In Ace Combat 4, you have to deal with Stonehenge, which is a big battery of guns that they were going to use to shoot down fragments of Ulysses, and they turn it into a weapon.
I think we do have to bring up the fact there are super weapons in this universe.
There were some super weapons beforehand, but the fact that they had to push technology so far to find a way to deal with this incoming threat is why there are so many different kinds of super weapons. Before we get into discussing the main modes of the game, we want to discuss how it plays, because it's not the most underserved genre by a long shot, but it is pretty likely that you haven't played one.
The most common flight game I've seen people play is probably Microsoft Flight Sim.
Yeah, and that is a simulator, not an arcade-style game.
Ace Combat as a series, it has some level of simulation aspect to it. Real planes can't hold 100 missiles, they can only hold 4.
Yeah, you'll hear people call out that you're firing Fox 2 like 10 times in a mission. Should be on Fox 25 by now, but okay. So the first aspect is the controls, and there are actually 2 different modes for the controls, so that even if you're kind of uncomfortable with the already abstracted flight model of the normal controls, there's an even easier version. With the novice controls, logically, left moves left, right will turn you right, and down will move you up, and then up will move you down. It's a genre standard. You can change it if you like. You don't really have to think about it much, whereas if you're on normal controls, left will roll the plane left, you'll spin left, and then down will move you up and up will move you down. But now instead of turning by just pressing left, you spin the plane so that when you press down or up, you will turn in that direction. When I first played the game, I played on novice controls because I tried normal controls. I'm like, why would I ever do this? But it does give you more flexibility. Just a little bit more, actually, I discovered. But it can be a pretty big difference to your play experience.
On normal controls, you use the R1 and L1 buttons to yaw, which is the avionic term for turning. Once you get used to it, pretty easy. If you hold both of the bumpers, it puts you in autopilot mode. It'll level you out.
Which is quite useful because it's very easy when you can spin all over the place to kind of lose your sense of direction. So using autopilot will realign you with the horizon. The other set of shoulder buttons are your accelerate and decelerate. Once you accelerate for a while, if your controller has vibration function, it'll vibrate when you hit afterburner, which means you're not going to gain any more acceleration. You'll still gain speed, but your rate of acceleration will not change. Then you can decelerate with the other one. This is important to maintain your flight speed because you need to maintain control for when you fight other planes. If you zip by them, you want to decelerate as you turn. And also, if you're on normal controls, yaw like upwards so that you're fighting gravity more, so that you don't move as far while you're turning, so you can make a tighter turn. Whereas if you're on novice controls, you can decelerate and turn. And it's okay, but it's not as fast. So you kind of have to make wider arcs to turn and face a target.
You gotta also be careful about your speed, because if your speed is too low or your rate of climb is too high, you will enter a stall. Your plane is not generating lift and will start to fall out of the sky, which is obviously bad. The faster you're going, obviously you're going faster, but you won't be able to turn as effectively. The slower you're going, you'll be able to turn better, but you might start falling.
Yeah, and if you hit a stall, you just have to jam on the accelerator and try and get back to full speed so that you can pick up again.
Yeah, angle your nose up, start accelerating, and you'll get out of the stall pretty easy.
Yeah. So if you're taking tight turns and you're close to the ground, you'll want to maybe not do that, because if you stall, you might not recover your speed before you crash. In later games, you can hit the ground and just take a huge chunk of damage but survive. In this, crashes are just 100% fatal. You will instantly die. You have to be careful when you're flying around obstacles and attacking ground targets.
And even then, in Ace Combat 7, surviving a crash, you have to be at a really specific angle going at a very specific speed.
You have your square button, which controls your radar, which is kind of weird. It uses the PS2's pressure sensitivity for how far the radar zooms out. They changed this in later games, but in 5 you have to press down the button with a certain level of pressure to affect the zoom. And it's kind of awkward, but usually you don't have to change it too rapidly in gameplay to assess the situation.
Even playing the emulator version, I didn't see much use of having the 3 different maps. I think you would use the most immediate one, then the wide one when trying to go find faraway targets.
Ace Combat 5 doesn't have a whole lot of big furballs like Ace Combat 6 would later have. The most common use of the larger zoomed out map is just can't find any enemies, where are they at.
And then you have a button to switch targets. I don't really understand entirely how it cycles, because it won't always go for things right in front of you. I think it's how close they are to you, but in a radial pattern.
I believe so. I mean, that would seem the most accurate.
It's sorted by magic.
I would say there are some times where I had to kind of strategize around the fact that I wouldn't switch always to targets I wanted to. Kind of a bummer, but surprisingly, in a game that can be this fast, it's not terrible. It's just not ideal.
It's an annoyance.
Yeah. And then your X button and circle button are for your weapons. X button fires your machine gun. You have to be within about 750 meters of the target. You can choose between metric or standard measurement systems, and I put things in metric because I'd like to believe in another world that we would never use standard measurement systems.
Also, the game is very nice in that the HUD also lets you know when you're close enough.
Yeah, it'll show you your cone of fire. Basically, a little circle will appear on your HUD.
Yeah, and machine guns are unlimited on normal and below for those difficulties, and becomes limited on higher difficulties. And circle button is what you'll mainly use to fire missiles. And this is the main way you'll be engaging targets in this game. The way that these work is kind of what makes regular dogfighting so engaging in Ace Combat, is that you have to have a good angle and trajectory on the enemy for the missile to hit. Because it'll track them a certain amount and a certain distance, but after that it just goes on its own. So if an enemy can outmaneuver it, you won't hit them. If you're at the wrong angle, it'll fly right past them. And you usually need one missile for a lot of soft ground targets and helicopters, and for larger targets or most planes, you'll need 2 missiles.
We joke about the 100 missiles, but you're gonna need them.
That circle button can also be used for special weapons. You just press the select button and you'll switch to your plane's assigned special weapon. Each plane gets one, and these can be a whole assortment of things. Like your first plane has unguided bombs. It's just for ground targets. You'll see a little targeting point and you'll want to line it up with that and fire. Some are special types of missiles for, say, air-to-air combat. Like this one will go extra range. This one targets 4 targets at once.
This one is a quick maneuver air-to-air missile and is basically Excalibur.
And we can't forget the biggest gameplay feature. If you hold down circle while shooting a missile, you switch to a different camera that lets you see the cool bomb.
I never do that because I'm always doing some risky flying, and if I'm not looking at my plane, I will crash.
I always do it.
It's a cool thing to do. It has gotten me killed in Ace Combat 7 more times than I can count. For whatever reason, they let you still do it in multiplayer, and that's probably the worst place to do it.
For the aircraft you're flying, they all have different stats, and stuff like maneuverability, you'll learn by feel how much each value is worth. You can fly a plane with this level of maneuverability, and then you'll say, like, okay, this seems about normal for the F5, my starting plane. And then you switch to something like the A6E, which is a big bombing plane, and you'll say, okay, going down by this much maneuverability is bad, and the A6E is bad, and you shouldn't use it, and I hate it. The planes themselves are classified into fighter, which means primarily geared towards air-to-air combat, attacker, which means geared towards ground combat, and multi-role, which means both. These planes have air-to-air and air-to-ground values assigned to them as both a general guide for its effectiveness and also for later in the game when you are choosing which planes to use on what mission. There's an expected level of force the enemy has that's indicated on the hangar screen. Ideally, you want to reach that level with the planes you select, but you can do any mission in any plane. I wouldn't always recommend it, but you can do any mission in any plane.
I mean, when the game really wants you to use a particular style of plane, it'll let you know, like during mission briefings.
Mm-hmm. And we mentioned that there are, air and ground targets. Like soft ground targets would be things like anti-air guns or SAMs, surface-to-air missiles. Generally, with types of enemies, you'll learn over time which types they are by their model number, because that's how all the targets are generally sorted. So you'll see AH-64 is like, oh, this is an attack helicopter. CH is a combat chopper. This is an F-15E, so it's a jet, so it's going to take 2 missiles. And this will help you over time develop a sense of just how you should be prioritizing your targets, depending on whether you're defending something or trying to destroy a certain amount of targets in a certain amount of time. Each target has a point value as well, which figures into this game's kill rate system. With certain planes, they have a meter in their name in the hangar. And as you defeat targets, which are valued based on what the target is and what difficulty you're on, you'll fill that gauge. And once it fills up, you will unlock the next plane in that tree of planes. Later on, you'll gain the ability to use wingman commands. These are tied to your D-pad. You can use them to order your wingman to attack, which will attack the target in front of you that you have targeted. Cover, which means they'll generally try to keep enemies off your tail. Disperse, which means they'll spread through the area. And then there's another button that's a toggle for whether they can use their special weapons or not. I always toggle it on. Why not?
I always kept mine in disperse, personally.
It was weird. When I played the game the first time on normal with novice controls, I felt like the wingmen didn't do anything. Like, I really think they didn't do anything. But then when I played the game recently on hard with normal controls, I found that they actually did help a lot. I wonder if it's tied to the difficulty, how good their AI is. Which is why a lot of reviews would say, it seemed like the wingmen didn't do anything that would line up because they probably didn't play on hard their first time.
Yeah, like for this recent playthrough, I played on hard, and they definitely start helping out. There are even times where they stole a kill from me, but I'm not salty about that.
And we've been mentioning the difficulty levels. There's Novice, which is ridiculously easy. I kind of wouldn't recommend playing on it at all. I feel like you would barely get anything, plus on lower difficulties, enemies are worth less kill rates, so it would take you maybe the whole game to fill those meters.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, if anything, I would recommend Novice just as, like, you play the first few missions on it so that you can get a hang of the controls and then move up to normal.
And normal is a pretty fair way to play. I think there will be some parts that are still tough, but it ramps up, I think, appropriately, whereas hard, I think alleviates a lot of issues with feeling like the game is too easy, but there are parts where it can be very difficult, and the fact that this game does not have checkpointing in it can really grate.
If I were going by intended experience, normal would be good for your first playthrough, and every subsequent playthrough, and maybe even other games, I would just go with hard.
Yeah, except Ace Combat 7. Ace Combat 7 on normal is so difficult. It is so difficult.
Yeah, Ace Combat 7, you need all those extra fancy maneuvers that they added, because otherwise you will get hit by the 30 trillion missiles they are firing at you every second.
And we're making that sound bad. I actually kind of enjoyed the stress.
Oh, it's really good. It's super tense. It doesn't feel like you're just gonna like waltz through combat, and when people start talking about you like you're a legend, it's because, you know, you're actually avoiding some incredibly hairy situations.
So before we discuss the story mode, this game does include a mode called Arcade Mode, and yes, the whole game is arcadey, but Arcade Mode is very arcadey, and it is a sequel to Ace Combat 4.
You play good old Mobius 1.
Tonally, it's so different from the game, because it's just got like rocking music, there's no gravitas or anything like that, no pathos, just we've determined that Mobius 1 is as effective as an entire fighter squadron, so we're sending just Mobius 1 to destroy this uprising of people from the last war who are still trying to disrupt the peace that you achieved.
So, like, Ace Combat 5 has like a very grounded feel for how each person is, and then the arcade mode is like, Mobius 1 is God incarnate and will kill everyone on Earth. It's like, okay, I guess that's me.
They call him the Grim Reaper in 4, but this is where that name actually makes a ton more sense.
The way arcade mode is laid out is that there are different routes for stages, so you complete one stage and you can pick, I think it's higher routes are easier and lower routes are more difficult. Your main limiting factor is that you have to destroy certain targets within missions to get more time or ammo. The missions are, I feel like they're not that memorable individually. They are good, it's fun, but it is more of like that rush of an arcade experience that you would maybe get from playing like Air Combat 22 or Ace Combat 2 or something like that.
You get a choice of levels to do, but mostly what that determines is just like, do you shoot down this type of enemy, or do you shoot down, you know, the different type of enemy?
Yeah, I mean, the combat in this game is solid enough that I think the standard arcade mode is still worth going through.
Well, it's worth going through for a different reason as well, because if you beat arcade mode, you get the F-22, which is absurd if you then start the main game.
Well, you have to do all of the stages on all the routes to get it, but yeah, then you get the FA-22A Raptor, which in real life is a stealth plane that doesn't work if it gets wet in the rain because the canopy cracks, and it costs $1 billion. Thanks, guys! But in this fictional, fantastical world, the FA-22A is one of the best planes. And you normally only unlock it once you beat mission 17 out of 30. I would recommend not doing all of arcade mode.
Play arcade mode after you beat the story.
Yeah.
We mentioned the composers who worked on various tracks. They also contributed to the arcade mode soundtrack, and it is tonally like, if you played Dynasty Warriors, it sounds like that. The tracks have names like Elemental Particle 2 and Catch the Lightning.
If Puddle of Mud showed up in arcade mode, it would be a lot more tonally consistent.
Well, not Blurry. Blurry would be way inconsistent. I also don't want to hear any of their music.
But it has so much soul.
Yeah, arcade mode is just the Dynasty Warriors of Ace Combat, though, so...
That's that for arcade mode, and now we're finally going to get to the story mode. There's an aspect of this game, like, the dialogue can be kind of flowery about the nature of war, but there is a level of naturalism to it, and that people don't, when they first show up, find an excuse to say that person's name. And when you're playing through the game, it's not confusing, because they always make it pretty clear who is who. So even if you don't know the base commander's name, you'll know who he is, and then when they say his name, you're like, okay, that's his name. But for the sake of this, we'll name people as they show up, because this isn't a visual medium at all. This game is mostly narrated by a photojournalist named Albert Jeanette, voiced by Matt Mercer, and the game kicks off with a prologue.
15 years ago, there was a war. Well, war's broken out here plenty of times before. They've tried to invade the Southlands through the Northern Valley time and time again. Luck was never on their side, though, and their victories didn't last long. They didn't realize that times had changed. Facing one defeat after another, losing territory and watching their nation dwindle, they built up their industrial strength to unprecedented heights and used it to wage one final battle against the world. That was 15 years ago. They fought ferociously, but were utterly defeated. The Belkans then committed the unthinkable. They used nuclear weapons on their own soil. Seeing this tragedy unfold before their own eyes, the victorious countries vowed to throw down their weapons. The world was once again at peace, and thanks to them, it seemed it would last forever. On a distant island, far away from civilization, the protectors of the peace take to the skies.
So after that intro, we see that Jeanette is in a plane with a pilot named Jack Bartlett with the call sign Heartbreak 1. He's voiced by Steve Bloom. Back again, baby. He's in everything. And he is a veteran of that previous Balkan War, and he's famous for turning rookies into aces. But they've been attacked during a training exercise by unidentified enemies. He sends some of them away from the action below, and with the rest of his team moves up. Jeanette passes out during this dogfight. The next scene is them on the ground, walking away from the plane, and Jeanette reveals that the rookies in that area down below, away from the fight, were actually moved directly in the enemy's line of fire because the command room, as he says, misplaced some zeros. The other instructors also died. The only remaining pilot is the trainee Kei Nagase, call sign Edge, voiced by Karen Strassman. She promises to not get killed, and Jeanette finds her very interesting by her seemingly very quiet demeanor that she survived this really awful battle. But after taking a photo of her, Jeanette reveals that his gear has been confiscated by the base, and he has been confined to the base because they want to keep everything under wraps. The remaining members of Bartlett's squadron, War Dog, are joined by Alvin Davenport, whose call sign is Chopper, and he's voiced by Eddie Frierson, and you, the player, whose call sign is Blaze.
You're voiced by the D-pad.
I do love how lucky Osea was in just having 3 aces not go into this ridiculously terrible training mission that got everyone killed.
Mm-hmm. And so after all that introduction, you get Mission 1, Shorebirds. The briefings in this game, this is actually a detail I didn't appreciate at the time because I played it on a CRT television, but they actually put a lot of effort into making the presentation of these displays as a very CRT-like. They have the test pattern, they have the fuzz on them and stuff. It's really cool. Like when you see it on an HD display, you can appreciate the amount of work they put into capturing it, which is impressive because a lot of people at the time probably saw TVs and were like, that's just how things look. Like you wouldn't really try to recreate that.
I mean, they look just chef kiss, it's great.
Not to mention the soundtrack for the briefing. It's got this like sweet slap bass. It's playing under this part right now as we're talking, but it's such a good briefing theme. And, like I mentioned in the Nier episode, the person giving the briefing, well, there's a character who gives a briefing, the base commander, Orson Perro. But when you get into mission details, those are all voiced by Jameson Price.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Should be noted, though, that Jameson Price will voice all of the mission briefing details in this game, even when it couldn't be the same person. When you're in like different bases or different command situations, it is always him, and he does speak with like a voice. He's not a computer or something.
They got the special future Jameson Price AI that tells you about the mission.
Yeah, he's like Hatsune Miku.
I want a Jameson Price vocal.
Hells yeah. For this mission, an unidentified spy plane has entered Oceania space and has been damaged by anti-air defenses, and your job is to go out there and, under Bartlett's command, request that the plane lands. Before the mission starts on the loading screen, you see an excerpt from a poem that says, "Amidst the eternal waves of time, from a ripple of change shall the storm rise. Out of the abyss peer the eyes of a demon. Behold the Rosgrees, its wings of black sheep." Which is so metal. Without any context, like, why am I seeing this? But okay, it's cool. I don't mind some cool black metal lyrics. It'll come to be more important later. But when the mission begins, you are told by the AWACS, that's the Air Warning Unit Control System. AWACS call sign Thunderhead, voiced by Kirk Thornton, who you might have heard if you played as Xiahou Duin in like Dynasty Warriors 8. He was also in a Gundam Side Story on the Dreamcast, along with Steve Bloom.
One of many, many dad voices in voice acting.
You fly this in the F-5E Tiger II. This is the only plane you can use until Mission 5. Very definition of the most standard plane. And its special weapon is an unguided bomb, so you're not going to use it on this mission. But when you have to go up against ground targets, it's a good thing to get you in the mode for fighting using your special weapons and differentiating between the two.
It's not like a terribly like big system, but it's the first time where like you can respond to your teammates talking to you. They usually ask you little yes and no questions, and it'll pop up on the screen whenever you did a prompt. You know, you'll have a yes on left on the D-pad and no on the right.
The game also gives you the option of just not answering, and they do comment on that every now and then.
There are occasions later when you're given command where a yes or no option will serve as giving a command to like disperse. The good thing about this is that saying yes isn't always the right answer.
It's strange because the game asks you questions that clearly you should have a clear answer to, but you can answer the opposite, and the game just pretends that, oh yeah, wow, you saw it somehow. Okay.
Sometimes you'll say no and be like, it'd be a really dick move to say no to this person. You say no and they'll be like, what the hell? But other times it seems like they just assume you have good intentions, so it's like, I don't know if we can make it through this, and you say like no, and they're like, yeah, I agree, it's really tough.
And the questions range from weirdly philosophical yes or no questions to, have you listened to this song?
There's also a lot of incidental dialogue in this game. That's one of the other things that keeps the campaign very interesting, is that even when you're engaging in the gameplay, it does shift depending on situations, but generally, you know, you're lining up your shots, you're getting in the groove of trying to get to different places on the map. There's always dialogue from either you, or you can even hear enemy communications. Sort of. It's fuzzy how much of that is treated as, like, you can canonically hear that.
I think the assumption is that the enemy chatter in this game, the player can hear it, but the characters in the story cannot.
For now, like, you just get some dialogue between Bartlett, and he'll ask you some yes or no questions. He says the state formation, you say yes, he's like, good boy. I'm like, oh, I don't like that. But he asks Chopper to get the spy plane to land, and instead of responding, a bunch of fighters show up. It's just a small formation, so it's pretty lightweight. Even on higher difficulties, this isn't so bad.
It's like, I think 5 or 6 enemies. It's not terribly hard. If you're really good at it, you can actually defeat all of the enemies before all the dialogue is exhausted. And like, you're supposed to not fire back. Thunderhead told you not to, but Plain Daddy Bartlett decides you can fire back.
Yeah, a running theme in this game is people not following their orders.
There's a lot of insubordination in this game.
After the mission, the spy plane attempts to do an emergency landing but blows up, and Bartlett gives Blaze the nickname Kid. The events of the mission are classified because the nearest base across the ocean is from the country of Yuktobania, who were allies with Osea during the Balkan War. So raising that suspicion now would be very strange. The mechanic shows up during the scene afterwards, named Pops, voiced by Bob Papenbrook, the father voice actor Bryce Papenbrook, and reveals that Bartlett's old flame is Yuktobanian, and that's why his nickname is Heartbreak 1. And then you get Mission 2, Open War. A spy ship has been spotted off the coast of your base on Sand Island, and has launched recon drones. So you have to shoot down the drones and not damage the ship. But when you shoot down the drones, you get ambushed. Once again, firing against orders. Pretty straightforward mission, but it is the first instance of where you hear enemy radio chatter.
The real curveball of this mission is just near the end, where Captain Bartlett intercepts a missile directed towards Edge and is shot down.
He ejects from his plane and a rescue helicopter gets sent for him, but the rest of War Dog has to return to base because it's revealed that Yuktobani had declared war on them. That takes you into Mission 3, Narrow Margin. Jeanette reveals that he got his gear back because Captain Hamilton, the adjutant base commander under Pero, tells him Yuktobani will launch a surprise attack on their ports. So now that it's out, all the photos he's taken and all the information he has is not any surprise. Yeah, Narrow Margin's the first mission that I think that stands out more, where you have to assist all these ships getting out of the harbor, but they've been surprise attacked and it's chaos.
I think it's also the first mission where you're allowed to give squad orders. After Bartlett is shot down, Edge is supposed to take over as leader of the squadron, but she defers to you, the player, to give commands.
Also, it's the first mission where the objective of the mission is not necessarily to defeat every enemy.
Yeah.
You're probably going to. The whole thing is there's an aircraft carrier, the Kestrel, you have to defend as it leaves.
And you're assisted by the lead pilot from the Kestrel, Captain Snow, whose call sign is Swordsman, and he is voiced by Bo Billingsley.
So Spike Spiegel and Jet Black are...
I feel like most of the Cowboy Bebop cast is in this game, actually.
Yeah, it's a tight crew. I think most of them are in Gundam Rise from the Ashes on Dreamcast. Also, there's a cutaway scene in this where you just get a black screen and Chopper narrates that light from the fire of the crash jet reveals that there are a bunch of dead bodies floating in the water. Suddenly shit got dark. I kind of feel like there's no version of this scene where there's anything there, but it kind of feels like maybe originally they were going to have a visual of this and then they cut it because it would have kicked the age rating up from teen to mature.
Most of the mission has stuff like your allies accidentally shooting each other because they couldn't identify enemies. There's just a lot of darker subject matter that only comes through the audio.
Yeah, I think having it in audio is okay by the ratings board's determination. Also, I was kind of confused because the cadence Chopper speaks in here is not the one he talks with most of the time, so I didn't know it was him. I'm like, who is talking?
Yeah, Chopper for that one cutscene is more serious than he is for the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm. Upon completing the mission, you find that the Kestrel and 3 other ships have successfully left the port, and the captain of the Kestrel, Captain Anderson, thanks everyone for escaping.
I would also say this is the first mission where it becomes clear that the checkpoints in this game are not great.
Literally, if you fail the mission, you gotta start from the start. For a first-time player, this is a pretty big mission. Like, there's a lot of enemies, and, there's variants and targets. There's gonna be stuff on the water, there's stuff, in the air. They're both gonna be shooting at you at the same time. It's a big jump in difficulty. This is probably the first time you might maybe get a game over.
It's also clearly cut into 2 separate parts. Like, there's the first part where you're helping the ships get out of the dock. Then there's defending them while on sea.
It's clear in a lot of places that they could have put checkpoints in, but they didn't.
I think the biggest loss there is hearing the same dialogue, even though it's good and it's well translated. Like, here at the same time, you'll start repeating it alongside the characters and just be like, get on with it. Like, you can skip specific cutscenes, but in-game moments when there's dialogue playing, you can't obviously skip that because you're in control. But there are moments like that where you're in control, but you're not really facing any hazards.
It's one of those things where if you're doing well and you've played a mission before, you may be just stuck in the air doing loops. It's not as egregious in these earlier missions, but there are some missions later on where, like, nothing happens for a little bit and you're just listening to chatter. And that's one of the few things I would say is kind of to Ace Combat 5's detriment.
Yeah, because I think maybe even after playing 7, I think 5 is the best in the series overall in all aspects. And I think in terms of games we've covered on the show, it is one of the highest quality games, but it's not perfect. The fact that the checkpointing is non-existent can really bite sometimes, but getting through it is still satisfying.
To compare, Ace Combat 7 has actually pretty great checkpointing.
Mm-hmm. 5 also, the graphic quality of the planes is pretty solid. Pretty much everything else is kind of muddy and doesn't look that good.
Yeah, that's PS2 stuff. Even Ace Combat Zero, which came out later, still had kind of muddy environments. It's very obvious what you're supposed to be focusing on.
I would say the thing that's dated to me right now is the cutscenes.
Yeah, they have that sort of PS2.
Yeah, I'd say that, but in terms of direction, they're still top notch.
As far as like PS2 goes, they look pretty good.
I mean, this is Namco at the top of their game in terms of aesthetics. This is the era of Tekken 5 and Ridge Racer 5 and Soul Calibur 3.
Soul Calibur 3, yeah. They're really pushing the envelope on the PS2, and this does not change for Ace Combat 5 or 0. There's a cutscene in Ace Combat 0 where it shows a close-up of your enemy's plane, and honestly, if you showed me that model of that plane, if I had not played 0 and you showed it to me today, I would assume it's from a PS4 game.
I think Zero made a slightly better decision in just having real-life actors just portray these characters instead of the models they have for 5.
It does have, like, the most obvious ADR in the universe, though.
Yeah.
We actually get that kind of strange disconnect between not using real actors but using real-world music. First, they mentioned that Bartlett was not found when they went to go rescue him, which they had to do later. Just the enemy intelligence vessel retreating. It becomes clear that Sand Island, which is very distant from the rest of Osea, is going to become the front line of defense against Yuktobania. When Jeanette and Chopper talk about this, it's right at the chorus of Blurry by Puddle of Mud.
Chopper, and I quote, says, "I love this sound."
Yeah, it's like, oh, I love rock and roll. It's like, I don't know. I guess technically you could say they are rocking and rolling, but to Blurry, the song that I think's about having being a distant father or something.
Chopper's weird in that they say he listens to a lot of rock and roll, but I also can believe that he just listens to Blurry on repeat every day.
In the notes for this outline, I can't put that there's an actual animated dog in this cutscene. 7 has the infamous JPEG dog, which was not actually a still image of a dog. The dog was just told to sit still, and he did, completely. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Ace Combat dog.
But yeah, this dog is Chopper's dog, Kirk. Chopper also reveals that Base Commander Pero is suspicious of Bartlett because his ex is Yuktobanian, and now he's vanished when Yuktobania attacks. But as soon as this comes up, you get hit with an air raid, and instead of a briefing, you get to do a takeoff minigame, which is new to this. Really pretty simple, but it's mostly there for set dressing.
Fairly easy to pull off. You just really just need to push down on the stick, and you're pretty much good to go.
Unlike later takeoff sequences, mostly because those missions are further away, this immediately transitions you right into combat. And you need to stop a bunch of bombers targeting the base runway.
There's literally a part where you're taking off and, you look out the side of your canopy and see bombs blowing up.
This one's also a pretty intense mission. Also, the music is good, but it reminds me of the Pirates of the Caribbean theme.
It does.
The music in this mission is a remix of a track from Ace Combat 4. It's a lot more, bumping in Ace Combat 4.
Also, I love the chatter in this one. They were having a replacement commander for War Dog come during this particular mission, and he's like, "I'm gonna take over," and is immediately shot down.
Mm-hmm. And no one cares because they all hate him. Also, mid-mission, Hops takes off in a transport plane because there's a bunch of volatile supplies like ammo and such on the base that they need to get away from there. And as he takes off from the transport plane away from the battle, Hans Grimm, with the call sign Archer, voiced by Johnny Young Bosch, doing a kind of nerdy voice. Not an annoying one, I don't think.
Yeah, Johnny Young Bosch is in this series a lot, and you can tell when it's him. He voices PJ in Ace Combat 0, and I am surprised they actually allowed him to voice another major character.
He is a replacement pilot trainee, so he hasn't even finished all his certifications yet, but Bartlett's spare plane was in the hangar. He requested that they get it ready when he thought he's going to be rescued. He gets in that plane and takes off, and you have to defend him from being blown up on the runway, and then once he takes off, he joins you. The big point of this mission is Grimm joining you, and actually doing pretty well, despite being a trainee, so he's immediately promoted to a full member. The base takes minimal damage, except for Chopper's rock and roll final.
Rest in peace, Blurry.
Pops comes back to base the next morning. You also get to do a landing mini game, and this is harder, but I don't know. I kind of all the mini games, this is still not too bad.
You pretty much just line a crosshair up with the landing strip, and then you just slow down and hit it at a right angle, and well, not at a right angle, but at the right angle.
You're also graded on how well you do your landing?
It's just how fast.
You can be like stopped on the runway but halfway down, and they're like, "Yep, good, all right."
Afterwards, Jeanette says that he was given official press corps privileges because he was freelance before, because Hamilton said he would have been a journalist if he had taken a different job. Jeanette feels like he owes him, and then says that maybe War Dog is the story's after.
Yeah, I think this is also the mission where your player character Blaze is officially considered leader of War Dog.
Yeah, because the replacement captain is dead, you are now declared captain. Which sets you up for Mission 5, Rendezvous, where Osea is going to use its remaining aircraft carriers to carry out a counteroffensive. So you have to join up with them at the Eglin Straits, which are covered in fog. And as captain, you can now purchase aircraft. We mentioned the points values earlier for targets. There are also monetary values. One thing that's kind of annoying is that buying and selling aircraft is a separate interface. The menu's kind of clunky, and it takes a second for aircraft models to load in. It's hardly the worst example of this you could get on any system, really.
Yeah, a little, annoying thing I find is having to purchase the same plane for all of your teammates.
I don't mind that so much, because especially if you play on hard, you make enough money that you can afford them.
This is important because the unguided bomb you have is sort of fine for this mission, but you may want something with a little bit more air-to-air punch. Especially because, in this one, you're still defending the Kestrel.
Yeah, a lot of water targets in this one.
You might want to buy different planes for yourself and your wingmen.
You get to keep the 4 F5s, and you can sell them also if you need to make some money to buy the other stuff. You do need a sortie with 4 planes, and since you can sell stuff back at full price, you can't run out of planes. Partway through this mission, all these other squadrons are leaving, nothing happened. Once those squadrons are far enough away, a bunch of enemies appear from the fog. You are left to defend the Kestrel with limited numbers. And a really good track plays.
Holy crap, Rendezvous is such a good track. Ace Combat has a history of having really good soundtracks, but Rendezvous was a track that was so good they used it for the E3 reveal, and then they just more or less changed the pitch of it for the full game, and it's still good.
Yeah.
You seem to be doing a pretty okay job of defending the ship, and then you get a call that a ballistic missile launch has been detected. The first one will go off and damage a bunch of ships. Then you're told that everything below 5,000 feet took really heavy hits, so you need to climb above 5,000 feet whenever the AWACS calls out that a missile's incoming.
Straight up an instant kill if you do not climb above 5,000 feet by that time.
They always say 5,000 feet, so if you're playing in metric, it's 1,530 meters. Which is important because I forgot I was in metric and I flew 5,000 meters in the sky.
You flew into the stratosphere.
I was very safe from the missiles, let me tell you. So when he calls in, you get a 10-second countdown, signaled by a burst of static, and you get this atonal beep noise when it comes in. And only the Kestrel, Swordsman, and War Dog survive the attack. And the rest of the carriers that they were going to base this attack around have been destroyed. War Dog is not close enough to refuel at a home base, and there's only one carrier to land on, so they go to Higher Air Force Base. Nagase has mentioned at the end of multiple missions that she's not going to lose her lead plane, and she says it here again for the third time, and I was thinking, is this just going to be her whole character? But this is the last time that she does this. And it's revealed afterwards that the attack came from the Sinfaxi, which is an advanced submarine that was in development since the last war in secret. And the last thing that you get during the debriefing is the command is going to use something called the Arcbird to destroy the Sinfaxi. That kicks you into the next mission, Whitebird Part 1.
It's probably the most visually stunning mission in the game. You have to defend Bassett Space Center while they prep a satellite payload to take a weapon onto the Arcbird. That weapon being a laser.
Also, it's mentioned beforehand that the region that the base is in is called North Osea, but it was originally South Belka, just beyond the region that was devastated by the nukes they set off. And Hirelark is also where Wardog trained. So they're very popular among all the trainees at the base. The picture used for the first article about this squadron that Jeanette writes, Chopper is covering your face, but everyone else's face is visible. So you are clearly a light-skinned man, but it is kind of ridiculous. Like, I guess they didn't want you to have a face because that would make you a specific person, but you already are a pretty specific person, so whatever. It was funny, but it is strange.
I also forgot to mention that Wardog has to send these new recruits to Sand Island. They're setting off with this particular mission, but they are escorting a bunch of rookies.
Also, a detail I like, after leaving Hirelark, you go to McNeely Air Force Base to stop off, and that's when the next attack comes against the Space Center. During the briefing, you can see the base commander logging in. So for Pero, his login is Island King, and then for McNeely's commander, it's Rocket Boy. It's mentioned that the Bassett Space Center was built by Osea and Yuktobania because they wanted to build a space station under the Osean president Harling's direction, alongside the Arkbird. They don't say here that it was made to destroy the fragments of the Ulysses meteor, but that's the thing that's getting in the way of building a space station, is there's so much debris.
Nagase points out that she really subscribes to the president's idea that space exploration is hope for peace.
So Yuktobania attacks by parachuting tanks into the area, and Chopper mentions that if you shoot the parachutes, the tanks will slam to the ground and be destroyed. And it is a pretty uncomfortable thing to do, but it is the fastest way, and there are a lot of tanks. When you're not even finished dealing with the tanks and also fighter jets, a bunch of cruise missiles come at this catapult as well.
The game is pretty nice in letting you miss one or two of the cruise missiles because they send a load of them at you.
Whitebird Part 1 really tests your multitasking.
Yeah.
You got a whole bunch of stuff going off at one time. It's a mission that you gotta really focus, otherwise you're gonna get overwhelmed.
You gotta use that overall map so you can see where the missiles are coming from so you can catch them ahead of time. Once the countdown happens, the catapult is launched clear. All the targets and stuff disappear when you get the mission accomplished notification. But afterwards, Jeanette mentions that they wouldn't know why they targeted the Space Center until it was too late. Because as a reminder, this is told in the past tense. And that's very ominous. Also, for being this mission, you unlock the FA-18C Hornet, which is a multi-role fighter. And I use that on a ton of missions.
Yeah, it's one of the best early game planes.
Yeah. From there you get Mission 7, Frontline. You have escorted the new recruits to Sand Island, but a large-scale amphibious invasion force is coming in. You and the trainees, who are referred to as Nuggets, are all sent out to fight them off. And this mission seems mostly just like a managing targets thing, where you want to stop them from crossing through the battle area to reach Sand Island. Until you hear that burst of static and an atonal beep and hear that a ballistic missile has been launched.
Wardog tries to help these rookies get to a higher altitude. They don't entirely succeed.
They're telling everyone to climb, get above 5,000 feet. But then Thunderhead calls in and says that he's getting an interrupt saying that there's some satellite link happening, and he doesn't know what it is. And then a laser shoots from the sky and blows up the ballistic missile. And suddenly the mission has taken yet another turn. And at this point, you'll still be fighting regular targets like, okay, I can handle this as usual. But as you proceed, Synfaxi launches 3 missiles in a row. And the laser's able to shoot the first one down, but after that, the other 2 go off, and all the trainees get killed.
Afterwards, the anti-sub detection just chimes in and gives you the Synfaxi's location. After they shoot one last laser to make the Synfaxi surface.
Yeah, they shoot the Synfaxi's ballast and it's forced to surface, and now you have a boss fight against a super weapon. This part is really intense, because at first you think, okay, it's surface now, I'm just going to have this fight. And this thing has a lot of targets, very strong, takes a lot of hits, and it will still launch burst missiles during the sequence, so you have to take on as many targets as you can and then make time to climb, because if you don't, you will instantly die and have to start the mission over.
Yeah, and this is a fairly long mission already, so you're probably really strapped for ammunition by this point as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had to basically finish this entire mission with a machine gun, which was terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
When you blow up this Infaxi, it crushes the invasion so much that they all retreat. But after the mission clears, you see another giant submarine maneuvering underwater. So once again, here's another ominous setup for the future. Also, you unlock the A-10A Thunderbolt II, which is the definitive ground attack aircraft. It has a giant chain gun that is pointed towards the ground more than other planes, so it's much easier to shoot ground targets with it. Ton of armor, it can take a bunch of hits. It's not very maneuverable, but it's not for dogfighting. This is also the only game where I actually really liked using it.
Yeah, the Thunderbolt 2 in 5 is pretty good.
After that, you get the mission Handful of Hope. Utubania has now settled down after the last invasion, so you're just going on a regular patrol in an area called Akerson Hill, which has an automated anti-air network. You go out there, and you're split into two groups, with you and Edge, and you encounter a transport plane using the call sign Mother Goose 1, which is on a secret mission to reach the neutral country of North Point. And it's not transmitting a signal because it's on a secret mission. So it took one missile hit and it needs help navigating through the blind spots in this anti-air field.
So your radar is able to pick up where the cone of vision for these AAs are. Basically what you're supposed to do is navigate your way through this, and Mother Goose 1 falls pretty decently behind you. It does ask you relatively to slow down or not take tight turns, but I don't think it really matters.
It's fairly forgiving.
It's maybe not the most exciting thing in the world on replays, but the first time you do it, it's pretty tense to just try and thread the needle and get through all those spots. Partway through, Yuktapani and fighters show up when you reach the other side. You hear some enemy pods talking about how they'll get medals for destroying the plane, and the plane begins to malfunction, and then you hear over the radio, like, the pilot gets cut off, and then someone else chimes in and says the pilot was killed by a spy, and the co-pilot is injured. So the guy on the radio says, "Well, I'm the cargo, and my secretary is going to try and land the plane."
And thus he asks you to call him Mr. Cargo.
You just need to blow up some wind turbines to make sure the plane can land. And the weird thing here is they only become targets in sequence. Like, as the plane gets closer, so you can't just all blow them up and then fly away. Then afterwards, Nagase asks Mr. Cargo if he had to use the White Bird to fight war if peace is still possible, because the Arcbird has been loaded with the laser, and it's pretty clear at this point that it's the president.
They very much spell it out to you at the end of this mission.
And he says that it's still possible, they just need the Arcbird so they have something to negotiate with. Everyone's low on fuel, so they can't stick around. So a group called the 8492nd Squadron comes in and say they'll handle the rescue operation. But afterwards, when they get back to base, Jeanette gets his camera pushed out of Perot's face because Perot's in a bad mood for some reason. Later, Jeanette asks Nagase what happened, and she says that the White Bird was the one thing they had for peace negotiations, and it just slipped out of their hands. And then you find out through narration that explosives were hidden in supplies delivered to the Arcbird, and its laser was destroyed. Like, I remember when that happened, it's just like, oh no!
It's like, ah, shit.
I just feel like stuff keeps happening when you're not expecting it, with the Synfaxi attacking and then the Arcbird getting destroyed. You get the sense, too, that no matter how strong your successes are, you're going to be on shaky ground throughout this. And that leads into Mission 9, Lit Fuse, where Osea is finally ready to do an amphibious invasion of Yuktapania, and you have to assist 4 different landing groups. You have to go split your attention to 4 different locations because they're all happening simultaneously. So again, this is just like a systems-driven, make sure your allies don't get wiped out.
Each group will let you know when they're about to lead an attack.
Pretty straightforward mission. Also, before this mission, the poem you get changes to "The demon soars through dark skies, fear and death trail its shadow beneath, until men united wield a hallowed saber. In final reckoning, the beast is slain."
Continue to being incredibly metal.
Also, Grim tells Chopper that his older brother is part of the ground forces.
You can sort of see like the vestiges of what would become like the multi-front system in Ace Combat 6 in this mission,
Yeah.
but it's way more focused and sort of sequential in that they'll tell you, hey, you know, we're about to move up. Whereas Ace Combat 6, just like, oh shit, war is happening all the time everywhere.
And then after that, you get Mission 10 Blind Spot. This one's another one that's mostly a gimmick in that you have to destroy retreating enemy transport planes. There are a bunch of jamming aircraft, so like your targeting will get messed up. You won't be able to see where enemies are. It'll look like there's maybe more targets than there are, like 10 times as many targets when there aren't. Grim's actually the one who notices that it's the jamming that's causing 100 aircraft to show up.
Yeah, and these jamming aircrafts, they're way above all the other aircrafts too, so it's not entirely hard to pick them out.
Mm-hmm.
So, earlier on we mentioned the yes and no prompts. In this mission you get an important one, but you're not going to realize it's important until the next playthrough.
It is such an innocuous question too. It's like, hey, have you listened to Face of the Coin?
It doesn't even say that until afterwards what the song is called. It's like, did you listen to that song? Yes, no.
Chopper asked you whether you listened to a song. You did a yes or no prompt. In this particular circumstance, it considers not answering the same as no.
Mm-hmm.
It's in your best interest to answer. The 8490 sector shows up and strafes a Tabani Engineering University. You take the fall for that one?
Yeah, because there was jamming going on, so no one knew that there was anything else going on. It's just like, well, we know you were there. Afterwards, you get sent to the capital, Aured, to face judgment for this, and everyone says 8492nd showed up and did it.
The response is 8492, 8492. Is that number all you people know?
Wardog is sent to one of two missions, and they decide via coin toss, which is what the yes or no question that Chopper asks you leads to.
And if you say yes, I'm going to say you get the good set of two missions, and if you say no or don't answer, you get two missions with much better music, one of which is the worst mission in the game, and the second is the mission people mention hating the most, but I'm okay with.
I did not do those two missions in my playthrough this time around.
So first, if you say yes, you get mission 11A, Chain Reaction. A civilian international airport's under attack. This one is pretty straightforward, just destroy the targets. There's not too much to say, like the chatter is good on this mission.
The chatter does talk about what you would be doing in the other mission, in 11B.
Which they mentioned there's a gas attack. It sounds pretty serious, it's a gas attack in a college town, but they take care of it. The capital has its own air defense force, there are just two targets, so they sent Wardog to one. From there, you immediately get sent to another branched mission, mission 12A Powder Keg. You have to destroy a Yuktobanian ammo storage facility in a jungle area. The two gimmicks of this mission are lining yourself up so you can fire missiles straight into the mines where they store the ammo. And also, there are ground troops with shoulder-mounted anti-air missiles who you can't see or detect via radar. If you shoot into the jungle like where they are, they'll stop firing at you. I mean, you probably kill them.
They are incredibly amazed that you actually found them and shot them.
Also, the music for this mission, I mentioned in the Mega Man X4 episode, SNES games had this distinctive reverb effect to them. And the instrumentation for this, outside of the higher quality like orchestral sounds, all the backing stuff sounds like it's from an SNES game. It's pretty cool, but it was like kind of weird to notice. Like, is that the sound of like the music in Secret of Mana playing? While I'm launching missiles into these ammo depots. Also, there's a hidden hangar with a red stripe on it that has experimental aircraft parts inside when you blow it up. They'll remark on it when you do it. But it's not entirely likely that you'll find it because there are multiple of these throughout the game and you can't get them all in one playthrough. But this one is completely out of the way. It's in like far like northeast of the map or something.
Yeah.
Separate from all the ammo storage facilities, and you just fly over there. Then it will appear on your map as a target, and then you can destroy it. But yeah, that'll be paid off later. Now, if you said no or didn't respond to Chopper asking about Face of the Coin,
Then you screwed up.
then you get Mission 11B, Reprisal, which is about the gas attack in the college town of Bana. sounded pretty dark, but it's the goofiest mission in the game, which is weird because it's also the most boring mission, where you get a Mirage 2000D plane to fly, with the special weapon being an anti-gas agent that fires in like a grenade-like arc, and you can't lock on to the gas spouts. They're not super hard to hit, but it's really awkward.
You go through all the rigmarole of neutralizing this gas, and then you have to fly around for 4 fucking minutes while they talked about this wacky getaway.
The one thing you can do, you're not allowed to shoot the van. Even though you can damage it, I feel like they should just stop, because it's a plane that shot them, and they're like, wow, we could get shot more, and it should stop. Also, when the police officers mentions he has an anti-tank rifle, and everyone's like, that's not standard issue, so it's like, this guy just has a hobby purchase of an anti-tank rifle. Like, there must be no gun violence problems in Strange Real if someone can just buy an anti-tank rifle for fun. This goes on for 4 minutes, and it regularly cuts away from flying to close-ups of the car chase, but it's so boring. And like I mentioned, vehicle models aren't that good, and the ground textures aren't that good. So it's like, you're really going to zoom in on these low-detail, muddy textures for this sequence for 4 minutes? The one joke I do like is they throw stuff from their car, which shows up on your targeting computer. So it'll be like chair, rocket launcher, gun. But if you blow those up, actually, with like your machine gun, then they'll throw a bucket of fried chicken out of the car to gain speed.
The world's worst casualty. Truly, war has such a high cost.
Speaking of casualties, 300 people died.
So after all that wacky shit, when like, oh, we have an officer missing at his daughter's birthday party, ha ha ha, what a fun time was had, freeze frame credits roll. That's like, by the way, 300 casualties resulted from the gas attack.
It's playing like, you everywhere you look, and then it's like, it just pops on the screen, 300 casualties reported in gas attack.
So yeah, easily the worst mission in the game. I must have played it the first time I played through the game, because I played through everything, but I completely forgot about it, and when I played through it again, I'm like, this is really still going? Am I doing something wrong? But no, you're not. This mission does not get enough flack compared to Mission 12B, Four Horsemen.
You're in a dry, sort of almost deserty region. There's a Yuthabanian munitions factory there that you have to take down. And it's protected by this big radar network. And you have to destroy each of these 4 sites in this interlinked radar network individually, but at the same time. The entire time you're doing this mission, Nadase will provide a countdown for you to hit targets. The thing about this is the window for hitting these targets is really tight.
It's not terrible. If your missile hits after she finishes saying 1, it usually counts. I think if she says 2 when you're also at like maximum missile lock distance, like when she finishes saying 2, if you fire a missile, it'll hit when she says now.
The game does prime you for something like this with the ballistic missiles in the earlier missions, but I feel like the one here is tighter.
We do have to mention, though, the most important part about Four Horsemen is the music is so fucking funky. I love it.
We say like a lot of the music is great in this one, but this one is exceptional.
Yeah, it's really good.
This is actually, upon re-listen, my favorite track in Ace Combat 5, straight up. After you destroy the radar rings, you do get to blow up a ground base. The only problem with that sequence is there are some targets that are inside hangars you blow up, where you have to be right over them, or flying straight downward at them to get a good shot at them, like you'll otherwise miss a whole lot. Very strange, but other than that, yeah, like that part's good. Then you get to hear awesome music and just wreck this secret base. And there's also another set of hangar parts here. That's why you can't get all the secret plane parts on your first go.
Yeah.
And from there, you get Mission 13, Demons of Rosgreaves. I just love that you see a shot of like an Arctic area, and a single burst missile flies out of the water. Nagase is in the briefing room, trying to remember the next line of a story she heard as a child. And then Chopper's like, oh yeah, I heard that story. It's the Demon of Rosgreaves, right? My grandmother used to tell it to me. And then Jeanette narrates what this legend is, that in times of great change, this demon called the Rosgreaves appears and rains death on the entire world, and then dies, but after a period of rest it returns as a hero.
I also really love this cutscene because at one point Chopper basically extends his hand out to like get the book Nagase's reading, and I don't know what it is about that cutscene, but it looks like she slaps his hand away.
Your mission is to destroy this new super submarine, the Hrimfaxi, which is hiding in the Rosgrease Straits.
War Dog follows a transport submarine bringing more missiles to the Hrimfaxi, and they are given a very limited window. If they're caught, they only have a solid minute to shoot the Hrimfaxi before it submerges.
Before you get to the mission, you get to do a mid-air refueling minigame, which is the hardest one because you have to line up with a plane. It seems like it might not be too hard, and then you wobble all over the place, and you're like, am I going to crash into this plane? Am I going to line up with it properly? I flew past the plane, what do I do? But you can also do it like really fast once you get the hang of it. I think in terms of minigames, it's the one that's most satisfying to get good at it. Just like, yeah, I know how to fly a plane.
That's right. I'm a pilot.
I could shoot down hundreds and hundreds of fighter jets and destroy tons of bases. You want me to line up a crosshair with a plane in midair?
Impossible. No one's ever done it.
The Hrimfaxi has basically the same stuff as the Skimfaxi earlier, so you still have the ballistic missiles. Every now and then the Hrimfaxi will submerge and re-emerge, so you basically have to wait a given time, and Chopper himself does not like waiting, as he points out.
It submerges just so you can fight the other drones and stuff it's released, but it re-emerges because the damage you do to it the first time means it can't launch missiles underwater. So sometimes it will launch a missile and it will be at the Ocean Landing Force way out there, and other times it will be launching at you, and Thunderhead will let you know which one it is.
Also, I think you have one other person acting as AOX in this one, outside of Thunderhead.
There's another mission commander, because another guy takes over during the briefing to let you know about it, because it comes from higher up in command. He's also observing the mission.
This is also the same mission where War Dog learns that all their higher-ups kind of suck.
But after you destroy it, the Hrimfaxi crew declares that we thought we were the Rosgrees, but it was actually the enemy squadron all along. After you beat the mission, everyone's celebrating, and Jeanette interviews Pops about his past as a pilot.
Me? Heavens. The ace pilots who sunk the enemy submarines are right over there. And I'm the person you want to interview now?
No, it's not that. It's just that I heard you used to be a fighter pilot yourself.
I just fly freight planes for the maintenance crews now. The captain, Captain Bartlett that is, said it was time for an old man like me to quit trying to compete with the young guys. Talk about a lack of respect.
Where did you meet Captain Bartlett?
We were both shot down and we bailed out behind enemy lines in the last war. We got through the bullet-ridden battlefield and made it back to the Allied front line. I tell you, it was tough getting the Army to believe we were on their side.
Shot down? You two?
Hey, it was a long time ago. Everyone makes mistakes, right?
It's funny that he's just so complimentary towards Pops. He's just kind of like buttering him up for some reason. Which doesn't seem like the most professional thing to do as a documentarian, but okay.
Yeah, Pops himself is kind of confused by it. He's like, but the really successful pilots who blew up a submarine are right there. Why do you want to interview me?
But yeah, the details of his past with Bartlett are pretty interesting. Again, it's a reminder, Bartlett's still out there. You don't know what's happened to him. So Pops is the most experienced person on the base that they're going to need to rely on. And then you get the mission with, I'd say this actually ties for my favorite song in the game. This is my favorite, like, song with a sense of pathos to it. For Mission 14, Ice Cage. A team of Marines has captured a POW internment camp, and they want to send in helicopters to rescue all the prisoners, but there are enemy aircraft in the area. They've taken over the base to a certain extent, but the other half of the base doesn't know it's been taken over. So they want to destroy all the patrol planes and then get the helicopters in there to get everyone out before the base realizes that they've been infiltrated.
Grimm brings up the possibility that Bartlett, who's still missing, might be part of the POWs in this internment camp.
And when you show up, Sea Goblin, the Marine team, recognizes Sand Island. They've gotten pretty popular. So they're like, oh, this mission's gonna go great. Because of this massive snowstorm going on, you won't detect enemy aircraft until they get close, but Chopper will give you a remaining aircraft count to let you know how many there are. And it's just like, have you been to the upper north part of the map? Okay, there's a couple there, there's a couple in the middle. Pretty straightforward.
After you take down all the aircraft, you have to take down ground defenses as well, because otherwise they'll shoot down the choppers. And after you do that, Nagase asks the Marine team if Captain Bartlett is with him.
They check one time, and she asks them to check again, and is immediately shot down.
The gunship that was accompanying Sea Goblin is sent to pick Nagase up because she's safely ejected. But because of the storm's intensity, the gunship immediately crashes too. And you don't want to leave her behind, but you can't do anything, so you have to leave with Sea Goblin and return later when the weather calms down. During your debriefing, Pero says, we have to look for Captain Nagase because everyone in War Dog has been promoted again. Jeanette goes into the rec room and sees Nagase's book she was trying to fill in. And it was a childhood fairy tale, A Blue Dove for the Princess. Which, actually, they put a lot of work into animating. Like, there was someone whose job on the staff was just to illustrate this children's book. And there are multiple pages, but you barely get to see it. It's very interesting.
I believe the Japanese version of the game came with A Blue Dove for Princesses along with the manual.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Also, I looked at that person's credits on Moby Games, and they never did anything like that ever again. Also, there's a person in the credits on Moby Games, I gotta mention this, that they were one of the people who edited the script for Radio Conversations. Later on, their job was the gameplay designer for Soul Calibur Legends, the Wii beat-em-up where you do waggle controls to do all the attacks, and it was really bad. So I guess, I don't know, stick to writing, buddy.
What a career. But with Nagase on the run, it leads us into Mission 15, White Noise. Nagase has her distress beacon with her. War Dog is given the mission to locate Nagase, which your HUD gives you a signal indicator that increases in pitch and tempo the closer you are to Nagase.
And as you are on the right path, a jammer aircraft will appear, and also formations of 4 aircraft show up. So this is actually a great mission to bring along a plane that has the XMAAs, or the ones that target 4 planes at once. Because they're all flying like right at you. I think it's 5 planes, but you can blow them all up with that, and then just switch to regular missiles to blow the last plane up, because it's super easy to hit planes when they fly straight at you.
Yeah, they're flying directly at you and you fire a missile at them. They don't really have much time to turn.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the XMAAs, because they travel faster than regular missiles.
Yeah, and they're also 1-hit kills on planes instead of 2 hits.
I should also bring up the fact that in the middle of all this stuff, while they're trying to rescue this woman, Sea Goblin randomly asks, "Hey, is she hot?"
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, buddy, you have more important things to do right now.
Also, I failed this mission a couple times the first time I played it, because once you get close to Nagase, she is not just a general area you need to fly by, even though the message for her noticing you is hearing your engine noise. You have to fly like directly over her point. So if you got really close and you're like, I didn't get her, like try to fly in the middle of wherever you looped around. If you fail the mission, she says, alright, I can't run any further, I'm going to destroy my radio and make my last stand here. Ooh, that's dark.
That reminds me, like, the first time I ever played this game, I think Chopper or Grim asks, like, hey, do you see Nagase on the ground anywhere? So I assumed that I had to keep looking at the ground to see someone.
Oh no.
That was a bad decision.
There are some things that show up on the ground, but, like, you have to be really close. Like, in the mission where you blow up the Hrimfaxi, they mentioned this, like, after the game came out, like, there are actually penguins hidden somewhere in this game, and people are like, oh, where are the penguins? And so, in the, like, free flight mode thing you can unlock in mission mode, where you just fly around a mission area, people finally realize, like, if you fly low on this mission, you'll see the penguins. I don't know why it was such a big... I mean, that's cool, but, like, was it like a meme? Because there are also penguins in the background of Tekken 5. Does that stage take place in the Rosgri Straits?
Well, apparently Ace Combat and Ridge Racer take place in the same universe, so who knows?
Mm-hmm. So after you find Nagase, then Sea Goblin shows up, and you have to protect them from planes and ground-to-air emplacements to protect the helicopter so that it can pick her up. Once she gets picked up, the mission's clear.
Chopper asks the question again.
Wouldn't Face of the Coin be great right now? And you can say yes or no.
A great little thing is, if you said yes earlier to the same question, and if you say no to this one, he's like, but you said earlier that you liked the song. Also, I want to bring up that the cutscene that plays after this mission ends is a shot of Nagase with the two helicopter pilots that crashed trying to rescue her from the previous mission, and a gun's pointed squarely at one of the enemy troops, and it lasts for like 5 minutes, and there's no movement at all.
Yeah, it's like a weird diorama. The shot where she's facing towards the camera with the gun is like in the concept art. It's a really iconic shot from this game.
And the narration behind it is, the enemy is referring to War Dog as the demons of Razgris.
Also, from holding the soldiers up, she got a bit of info from them, which is that this war is not popular in Yuktobania either. Meanwhile, Bartlett is still missing, so the higher-ups are still suspecting War Dog, because they're all Bartlett's former trainees. So, this sequence of events, despite being very stressful for Nagase, has not cleared them of suspicion. And depending on how you answered Chopper's question, you get one of two pretty similar missions. 16A is Desert Arrow, where you assist bombers and an army tank battalion to attack an airstrip and a field headquarters. During this mission, at the start, Chopper sarcastically says to Thunderhead that he is Razgris 3. This dialogue happens whether you do 16A or 16B, so also Grimm's brother, you'll hear him over the radio saying, yeah, that's my brother up there in the Sand Island Squadron. I'm really proud of him. Yeah, it's happened on 16A and 16B, which is why there's not much else to say about it, other than at the end of 16A, an enemy AWAC shows up. It takes a lot of shots.
Considering the mission that comes right after this, 16A and 16B being just pretty light is understandable.
Yeah. So 16A was Desert Arrow, 16B is Desert Lightning. For this one, you have to assist one tank battalion attacking an airfield and one tank battalion attacking an oil facility. The main thing that's different about this one is that there's just more ground targets. Once you defeat all of them, or time runs out, you get a mission update that enemies have appeared upriver, including a battleship. There are a lot of battleships in this game, and they're not to scale. Like, your airplane is bigger than them. This one is actually the right size.
They do better about that later on in the series.
Yeah, I mean, it's a limitation.
Yeah.
After you clear those missions, the government is holding a peace ceremony in a stadium in November City. War Dog has been cleared of enough suspicion that they're allowed to do a flyby as the vice president, whose first name isn't given, but his last name is Appleruth, gives his speech for this peace ceremony. And you're also a guard detail in case something comes up.
The idea is that after they do their flyby, War Dog immediately goes into their defense position.
For this formation part, you have to maintain formation or the mission fails. You do have to stay roughly in formation, but again, I got better with the normal control scheme. But even 17 missions deep, I was still sometimes like wobbling around. And Nagase's like, great flying, Blaze!
They will comment if you're getting really far away, and they'll give you a brief period of time to get back into formation.
Also, the music playing at this part is the music that plays when you do free flights in mission mode. Very uplifting, and it sounds like the kind of music they'd use for this occasion anyway, so it's hard to say whether they wrote it for free flight mode first or for this.
Appleroot gives his pro-war speech, and Chopper's just in the background being like, God, this is terrible, this sucks, I hate this.
Yeah, he's giving a pro-war speech at what's supposed to be a peace ceremony, saying like, we will never throw down our weapons, we will never surrender until we destroy Yuktobania. And then the crowd begins chanting a song, and he's like, wait, please stop singing that song. And then Chopper's like, oh yeah, if they want to be friends with the enemy, I'm cool with that. It's a peace song they're singing at the ceremony. But then, partway through this happening, a bunch of enemy fighters show up. This part's really good because Chopper notices the air raid siren hasn't gone off. So no one's evacuating yet for some reason. And the music kicks in along with like the chanting for the song, and it's really pretty eerie because the situation's taking a pretty obviously scary turn.
And you also get the chatter from the people manning the stadium, and they basically just confirm like they had no clue that an enemy squadron showed up and they don't have time to scramble everyone out of there. They're planning on first getting the more important people on the VIP boxes to safety before getting to the general public.
They mention that the nearest reinforcements are 6 minutes away, so you'll have to hold them off. while the timer is ticking down while you're fighting off all these enemies, you're like, okay, we gotta just get through the 6-minute mark. But then partway through, you hear the 8492nd leader chime in and say, like, oh, they had us all going for a while, everyone. It was just a drill. You can all head back to base. And Thunderhead's like, wait, no, what's going on? But they've deployed electronic countermeasures so that he can't communicate with anybody, except you because you're in the immediate area. And then stealth bombers show up to blow up the stadium, but also the enemy forces start talking about just focus your attacks on one and we can bring them down. And they focus on Chopper.
Chopper gets hit with a missile and takes damage, so he has to bail out, but he doesn't want to bail out anywhere close by because most of the areas are like housing.
He wants to specifically bail out in the stadium because it's an open area, but it's not finished being evacuated yet, so he doesn't want to bail out yet because he could put lives in danger.
Once the stadium's fully evacuated, Chopper's eject system fails. He can't break through the canopy, and his plane is failing, so he crashes into the stadium.
And the music just cuts out at that point, and it stays cut off for like a good 30 seconds.
A bunch of other enemy planes show up, and you can hear Grim and Nagase breathing like really heavily over the radio. As you destroy more enemies, they're fighting back even harder now. They say it's like we've awakened the demon or something. Eventually, after you destroy enough planes, reinforcements show up, and in your debriefing you hear that there were no civilian casualties.
I also like that at the end of the mission they do a missing man formation.
Then you get to mission 18, Fortress. This is a mission where the very first time I played this game I got stuck at, because there's like no twist to this mission. Again, this is such a system-driven game that you can just lay out targets in a challenging formation, and that can be enough to determine the mission's difficulty. But before we get to that, Pops is examining the wreckage of one of the Yuktobanian fighters that attacked during the peace ceremony. And he tells Jeanette, this plane is built lighter with fewer parts just to get them out there for a lower cost and with higher performance. I can't believe they're still making them this way. Jeanette says, who's they? And he says, North Osea Grunder Industries, which was formerly the South Belkin Munitions Factory. And then he heard a rumor that there was an all-Belkin aggressor squadron brought onto Osea sometime after the war, which was done in such a covert level that the current administration might not even know about them. And from there you get your briefing. And your target is Kruik Fortress, which has resisted capture twice without any air support. So War Dog is called in, and you have to take out all these targets and assist this battalion in getting through. The detail I like is that on your first playthrough of the game, there's an air-to-ground indicator for the mission, right, like I mentioned. With the planes you can afford at this point in the game, with 3 of them, it is almost impossible that you have enough air-to-ground power. Right away, you can already feel the fact that you're down to 3 members is hurting you really heavily in this part.
The thing about this mission is that there's lots of bridges and underpasses and everything like that. The best way to really maximize your hobbled air-to-ground power is you have to do some pretty risky flying. This is one of those missions where like an unguided bomb might actually be a good option just because of how big the explosion area is.
Yeah.
You're flying, really, really close to the ground. You're constantly getting the caution pull up. Mm-hmm. You should probably get used to that if you haven't already.
Yeah, I mentioned I got stuck at this mission on my first playthrough. That was during a pretty rough year of my life. That was like at the start of what would be a pretty rough year. And so I got grounded before beating this mission. And I gotta say, if there's a mission that I'm glad I didn't get to before getting grounded for like a year, it would be mission 18 plus 8492.
Thunderhead reminds War Dog that the next step is the Yuktobanian capital and instructs them to meet up with the Allied squadron to refuel.
Then you get a call. The 8492nd Squadron glad to lead you heroes to a refueling point. As you get close to the refueling plane, suddenly the radar gets fogged and a missile flies right at you. The 8492nd doesn't exist. And you can hear the enemy on the radio saying, like, we can't let them end this war too soon. It's like, wait, they're not Yuktobanian spies? Like, who are these people? Grim's like, this is like a trap, like what happened at the stadium. And Nagsei is also like, yeah, the 8492nd also rescued the president earlier. You have to just reach the escape line to the east and tell everyone what happened. Enemy planes on this mission are gunning for you super hard. I tried this mission on easy just to like see if there's any special dialogue for destroying all of the enemies, and it's just like, we ought to get out of here.
It is really heavily recommended, though, on your first playthrough that you just run away.
I tried to do this on easy with like a super plane, and I still died multiple times. They are at a much higher level. When you return to base, you get a scene of Jeanette hanging out with Pops.
Would it surprise you if I said that President Harling is nowhere to be found within the capital?
Not really. The hardline war Osea is waging right now hardly resembles the peace policy the president was promoting. Let me guess. He disappeared just before we invaded Yuktobania, right?
Exactly. My journalist friends told me that nobody's seen him enter or leave the office since. All of his decisions are communicated through the vice president. And it gets better. A lot of the military officers that resigned over disagreement with the president's arms reduction plan have started to return to the capital.
I found out something myself. That Belkan aggressor force I was telling you about. Apparently they're called the 8492nd Squadron. Also, and here's the kicker, Captain Hamilton, the adjutant base commander here, used to be assigned to the 8492nd.